Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to this session, part of the Cambridge at Home experience. And welcome to my home here in Bangkok, Thailand. I wanted to talk to you today just very briefly on a few ideas, mostly not my own, of what makes a good teacher and what makes a good online teacher. Well, a little bit of background of why this means so much to me. I think it comes from a lot of reflection and mainly reflection on one time when I went to an interview for a school that I was really hoping that I would get the job at, um, and got asked that question, and I was not prepared for it. Oh, I mean, I've, I probably went in a bit overconfident. I mean, I had my master's in education. I had my teaching certificate of TESOL. I had my background in linguistics. This was a job here in Bangkok, where I just thought, what could possibly go wrong? And it was all going great until that question. Um, I don't remember exactly how I answered, and I'm sure it had something to do with Gardner's multiple intelligences, and at that time learning styles was big, and just trying to answer with every single bit of theory that I had. But I noticed after that question in the interview, that the feeling in the interview changed, and I hadn't really thought about it enough. And that was in the year 2006. I remember leaving that interview and calling my mommy because at that time, being a good Southern boy from the United States, when we get a little down, we call our moms, and also because my mom was a teacher for a very long time. I remember telling my mom, "Hey, mom, just like you, I'm gonna be a teacher." And I remember her looking at me with those motherly eyes and saying, "Why? Why would you do that?" True story. But I called my mom and talked to her a bit about what makes a good teacher. She reminded me of a book that she read when she was learning to be a teacher. Kind of an older book, one called The Art of Teaching by Gilbert Hyatt. I'm not recommending this book. It's nice to read, but it's dated. It's written in the 1950s. In fact, it's copyright 1950. But this book really spoke to me, and it continues to speak to me. I turn to it in times when I'm just not quite sure if what I'm doing is right or good enough, and I think that tends to happen in times when my plans get turned upside down. Teaching in Bangkok has given me some times of trying to hold it together through floods, through political situations, through a lot of trying situations, and what we're experiencing with COVID-19 is definitely one where, as much as I think that it's great that we have workshops about technology, about what's available to us, what tools, what methods work. For me, to keep grounded and to keep sane, it's a lot of times just going back to the art of teaching. And I'm amazed at how much wisdom that I continue to find in this book. Even in the 1950s, Gilbert here, he knew what he was talking about when it came to teaching. Don't believe me? Page 9. The teacher's chief difficulty is poverty. He or she belongs to a badly paid profession. He cannot dress and live like a workman, but he or she is sometimes paid as little as an unskilled laborer. Sounds like this man understands teaching to me. When you get in through the book, though, he gives kind of a four-tiered paradigm of of what he thinks it makes to be a good teacher. And it's something that I've stolen, and it still makes sense to me to this day. So if you'll just indulge me just a little bit longer, I'd like to share with you my take on what Gilbert Hyatt from The Art of Teaching thinks are the 4 qualities of a good teacher. The first essential of good teaching, then, is that the teacher must know the subject. This really means that they must continue to learn it. Yeah, makes sense. You have to know what you're talking about. It sounds obvious, yet it's not always practiced. Unfortunately, I think this is true sometimes. I remember at one of my jobs, I was teaching for a language school that was affiliated with an Australian university that was teaching a British English book. And I myself, being an American, was desperately in a room myself trying to figure out how short rhymed with caught. Short, caught, short, caught. Not really understanding that, yeah, I spoke English, but did I understand the phonetics of English? Did I understand the complexity of the language? Did I understand that the book wasn't wrong when it said in that Australian way, how's it going? And not as I said to my students, I think they made a typo there and they should have said, how are you doing? But in this chapter, it's not only that the teacher must know the subject, it's that the teacher continues to learn the subject. And this means so much to me too now, being in professional learning and development. A good teacher understands that being an expert means that you're still not done learning. During COVID-19, when it kind of hit, I was actually on leave here in Bangkok because I was taking a course. And a lot of people were really wondering why I was taking the course. You don't need it, they said. You've already got a job that you don't need this certification for. And I said, it's not about the job. Knowing the subject and knowing what you're doing as a teacher is a nonstop process. And I think being a good teacher, first of all, I agree with Gilbert, understands that the first essential of good teaching then is that the teacher must know the subject. And that really means that they must continue to learn it. Page 18, the second essential is that they must like it. The two are connected, for it is almost impossible to go on learning anything year after year without feeling a spontaneous interest in it. You have to know the subject, and you have to like the subject. And I think with English language teaching, or any subject, but especially English language teaching, it's not just liking the fact that the present perfect is formed this way, or that, the coordinating conjunctions are and, but, or, nor, for, yet, and so. I think for me, it's liking what the subject does for the students, that English as a lingua franca, as a global language, just encourages communication. It encourages what we're having right now to happen. The fact that I can talk to you around the world through this lovely language of English. And if I can help share English, that more people can experience this connectivity. That's important. Then we get into the more difficult ones. The third thing. The third essential of good teaching is to like the pupils. If you do not actually like boys and girls, or young men and young women, give up teaching. It is easy to like the young because they are young. They have no faults except the very ones which they are asking you to eradicate: ignorance, shallowness, and inexperience. All had those classes where you just think, oh dear, or that one student, but it's the exception, not the rule. And whether I'm teaching online or whether I'm teaching face-to-face, it's really about liking the students. and remembering that it's not the subject that I'm there to convey, but it's this human interaction, this fact that teaching is a relational process, whether that's in the same room or through, not to, a screen. It's crucial. I remember one time when I was doing teacher observations in Vietnam, it became painfully obvious that one of the teachers I was observing put the subject above the students. It was a teacher who was doing one of the worst things that you can try to do when you're being observed. They were trying to show off. And they had decided to do a technique called door drills, perfectly fine technique. The students line up outside the classroom, and to get in, they just have to answer a question. If they answer correctly, they're allowed in the room. No problem with it. I think that they had just studied the past tense. This was a group of primary learners. And the teacher, as the students were lined up outside to come in the room, he said, "What did you do at the weekend?" Oh, teacher, I watched TV. Good. Enter the room. What did you do at the weekend? I played football. Good. Enter the room. What did you do at the weekend? I watch a movie. Watch? No, not watch. What do we say? Watched. Yeah, I watched movie. Good. Entered the room, and this was going on. And there was a student in line that came up, and the teacher said, "What did you do at the weekend?" The student said, "My dog, he die." The teacher said, "Not he die. Think about it. What do we say in English?" The student said, my dog die." Teacher said, "Not die, died. Say it." "My dog died." And the teacher said, "Good." The teacher there put the language and the lesson above the student. And while that student may have learned that the past tense of die is died, I'm not quite sure what else they learned that day. Students aren't always the easiest to teach, but I still love them anyway. We have seen then that the third essential of teaching in ordinary schools and colleges is to like the pupils. Is it also essential to know the pupils? It depends largely on the method of teaching that is being used, says Gilbert Hyatt. But I would say yes. Not just to know the pupils, but to know what they need, to know why you're there, and to know why this relational process works. One of the biggest mistakes, not mistakes, but one of the biggest aha moments I got as a teacher was with one of my students named Rex. Rex was a funny student. He was funny in his own language. He was funny in English. I remember one time he came into class. He said, Alan. Rex was probably an upper intermediate student. He said, Alan, last night I had a dream and everyone was speaking English in my dream. And I said, that's great, Rex. What was the dream about? He said, I don't know. They were all speaking English. I couldn't understand anything. He was a funny guy. There was one time, though, I think we were doing a reading lesson. This is an English for academic purposes class. And there was a problem he was having with one of the reading passages, and he came up to my area of the classroom, my desk, and he said, Alan, I'm really confused. Just can you help me out? What does this word mean right here? And I said, because I thought I was being a good teacher at the time, I said, Rex, it means that in the back of the class we've spent a lot of money on some very expensive dictionaries, and you need to go back and look in those dictionaries and find out what the word means. He kind of gave me a look, and he got kind of upset, not angry, but that kind of upset that sometimes our students can get with us. And he said, Alan, I just want to, I just want to get on with this reading passage. I'm a little bit confused. Why, do you just tell me? Why won't you tell me? And I remember saying, Rex, thought I was being so clever. If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And Rex looked at me and he said, give me the fish. And I think he was right. You see, I think in his mind, I wasn't helping his learning. I was becoming a barrier to his learning. And I knew Rex, and I knew that he wasn't a lazy student. I knew that he knew how to use a dictionary, but I knew that he was asking me for help in a way because he felt that that's what he needed in order to just get the small answer and get on with his reading. I almost got in the way of his own learning there because I was so adamant on looking it up in the dictionary. I don't know all the answers, but I know that as a teacher, if we have those characteristics, if we know our subject and enjoy it, and enjoy our students, and know our students a bit, that's what it takes to be a good teacher. And whether the medium is the classroom or through Zoom or whatever platform you're using, or asynchronous learning, or through Moodle or Edmodo or whatever, I think it goes back to what another great, Earl Stivik, let us know. And it wasn't in this book. It was in A Way or Ways, but I think Earl Stivik is known for being a humanist. And, well, from the back of the book, let me just read what Diane Larson Freeman said. The book was written by a practitioner for practitioners, yada, yada, yada. But she quoted one of his most famous sayings. It's people who share with Earl Stivik a belief that the most important part of education is people. What goes on within and among us. If you think back to your own idea of your best teacher or your favorite teacher, it's going to be someone, I believe, that reminded you of a way that they feel. Because just as Earl Stivik said, yeah, we have methods and techniques and platforms and mediums. But what happens in a classroom where learning happens is what happens inside and between the learners in it. And a good teacher remembers when they're planning, or when they're figuring out the technology, or when they're trying to do any of this, that so much of what they're teaching is more than just the present perfect. I want to leave you with one more thing. There's been a lot of talk for the last 20 years about 21st century skills, creativity, critical thinking, communication, learning to learn, the things that we at Cambridge call the life competencies. I want to say that I'm so happy to be a part of education right now. And while the COVID-19 is a very terrible pandemic, I've personally lost someone that I knew to it, and I know many people who've had it. I have to say that one thing that's come out of it is really this fundamental showing of what 21st century skills in practice looks like. Because we are the teachers, but what's our lesson? Yeah, like I said, our lesson could be the present perfect, but our lesson is also how we're resilient, how we adapt, how we cope, how we use those 21st century skills, how we use all the resources we can right now to make sure that learning still happens. Or if you're one of the teachers who unfortunately don't have a class right now and are looking for a job, it's about how we reframe and how we continue to improve ourselves so that we're ready for when the world returns to whatever normal it is, because it will return. What makes a good teacher? What makes a good online teacher? It's remembering that it's a relational process. Whatever method, whatever technique, whatever medium, whatever course book you use, I think as long as we stay grounded in that, we'll be doing okay. Thank you for everything that you do. Thanks for listening to me. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of this Cambridge at Home experience.